Hello, everybody. It's Donna Cravata, and we are here again for another Real 50 Over 50 interview. And today we have Paula Gregorowicz. I think I said that right.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Okay. And she's the founder of the Paula G company to help service-based business owners stop putting out the fires and simplify their processes, their automation, and their websites. With more than 30 years of experience in education and business, Paula inspires others to create momentum and progress on things that are most important to them so they can grow in a relaxed and in an expansive way. She's a formerly trained coach, passionate photographer, and the author of Open to Your Intuitive Intelligence Reflections on Nature and Wisdom. You can also find her writing in a variety of online and print publications and her Substack, The Nature of Things. Welcome, Paula. It's so nice to have
Thanks.
you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Donna.
So let's just dive right in and ask what happened when you turned 50.
Okay, yeah. So, my wife and I both turned 50 within 6 months. So I had all this great planning and ideas, right? Because on my 49th birthday, I was already thinking ahead towards 50, and I thought, how can I make this special? Because my 40th birthday year was a bit, life had other plans. Let's just put it that way. When my mom passed away and all that. So some of that got, nixed of my plan. So in 50, I thought, oh, it's going to be great. And I celebrated my birthday, and I was running around in the woods in the snow, and I was happy. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do 50 fabulous things the year I turn 50. And we're going to do this great big trip to celebrate both our birthdays. And then COVID hit and shut it all down. So our 50th year of celebration was more, well, as you might imagine, in 2020, it was what it was. But we adventured nonetheless. It just looked a lot different than originally planned. But one thing I've noticed since that time, and granted, as everyone experienced, work and business and everything was in an upheaval in a very different rhythm than what we're used to. But what I realized was that, well, maybe I want to decelerate any of this notion of hustle, right? So I've been in business for myself 17 years, and in which blows my mind just saying that number anyway, because I still feel like I'm 30 in spirit. But like all this hustling, like what the heck is it for, right? So when I turned 50, it's been an ongoing journey of like, okay, simplifying, streamlining. How do we create? One of my lessons learned from that time, as well as other experiences, is like, okay, so tomorrow's not promised to anyone. And that became very clear in different ways then, and to different degrees for different individuals. But like, why are we running around trying to, yell into a black void of social media or cranking things out, when in fact recalibrate towards, okay, why did I start my business in the first place? What lights me up? How can I spend more time doing that, and so forth?
Yeah. You're the 88th interview, and this is a common theme.
Mhm.
We really are questioning, like, what are we doing this for?
Right. There's the
And
questioning, and then there's the actually getting clear. Like I feel like clarity is the, I don't want to use like a cliche, like it's the secret sauce, but I feel like clarity is the sort of like the gas behind everything. Because
mm,
I personally can think about things, and I was writing about the difference between rumination, reflection, and and wisdom, and that idea of like clarity is sort of that thing that comes from a deeper place. And I know for myself, once I have some clarity, then I'm good to go.
yeah,
Otherwise, I can be like,
yeah,
Big Ben Parliament, circling, circling, circling. And so I think that clarity is an important piece. And then being brave enough and courageous enough and persistent enough to then take action to bring that about.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many people forget about that action part.
Action. It's not the easiest part, but it's
No.
necessary. Very, very necessary.
No, I was just listening to a Seth Godin podcast, and he was talking about possibility and enrollment, and
Mm,
how possibility is really important because you have to feel and think that it's possible.
mhm.
But it's not going to take you all the way there. You need the enrollment because the enrollment is the part that keeps you coming back. And
Right.
then the enrollment is the part where you have to bring your grit and you have to, show up even when it's not easy. And then that is the thing that attracts other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the second part of the enrollment where people enroll in what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to keep walking. Like I just got back from a big adventure because I love to travel and I love to do nature things, but it was a 4-day, 4-night raft supported through hike of the wild and scenic Rogue River in Oregon. And despite the fact that they say it's 40 miles, it's more than that because by the time you factor in all the back and forth to the lodge, to the lunch spots, et cetera, et cetera. But we were talking about that, by the last day, it's like, well, it's only 5 more miles. And I was like, well, who the hell would have said that like 5 days ago? But then once you start walking 15 miles a day, you're like, well, it's only 5. Uh, but even when it's hard and it's raining and it's sore, like you still have to keep putting one foot in the front of the other. Yes, rest is important and breaks are important. But if you're not putting one foot in front of the other, you'll still be sitting on a rock at mile 6.
Yeah. Thinking about your possibilities.
Yeah, waiting for the snow.
So I think that we kind of approach work from a very similar perspective about co-creation and building things together, and whether we're doing this, with two parts of our brain and our heart, or with other people. I think we both kind of take that approach. So I'd love to kind of talk about that a little bit. And
Yeah, regardless of the type of work that I'm doing in my business at any given time, I feel that I'm in partnership with the people I'm working with.
yeah,
Um, in the past, sometimes I'd have people go, well, just tell me what to do. Well, I really can't because you're unique. So whether we're doing something tactical or we're doing, more visioning or something, like I don't know you, and one size does not fit all. At 6 foot tall and a 34-inch inseam, I can tell you that one size does not fit all, and they still don't make clothes to fit me. So, what makes you think that your answer is right for someone else, right?
yeah.
So I like to work collaboratively like that, and also to
Mhm.
bring in other people onto my team that excel at what I don't,
Yeah.
because there's too many things, and
Yes,
so why should you settle for somebody who's half-assing it? Which is what it would be if I was trying to do something I'm not very good at, when in fact you can work together, and then the result is so much better, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm a big fan of not like I don't think there's a have to, right? Like I've worked with people for whom we've implemented and put together some nice bits of technology to make their daily business operations as a solopreneur or a small service practice work. And then I've had people who are like, I really like a piece of paper and a bulleted list. I really like a physical calendar. Great. Use that. Use what's you. Don't let other people tell you what you have to do or should do, because that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I totally agree. There's so many ways that this could be done, and technology just keeps making everything easier in many respects.
Sometimes.
Well,
When it's
sometimes,
working, when it's working.
but it's working. But I think too many people try to make tools do, not only people, but tools do things that they're not built to do.
Right.
and that's when you have the problems. But if you really research and think through and kind of iterate what you want before you start building it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, really, design and strategy is more than 50% of the
Mhm.
battle, right? Um, whether it was when I worked in corporate or now, like if you don't have the plan, the destination, the clarity, the thinking through the scenario, um, you're going to end up somewhere you might not want to be, or wrangling with things that you don't want to be wrangling with.
Yeah, yeah, and that's when things break.
And then people double down. I see it all the time. Like you make a mistake, say you've made a decision and it's not working out the way you want. Okay, great. But then there's that sunk cost fallacy and that idea that, like, well, I already invested this much into this, so we're going to try to make it work instead of just letting it go.
Yeah, that I see that a lot too. Um, I often get clients that come to me when they're frustrated because they've made the wrong choices, and they don't want to reinvest, so now they want something for free or almost free
Yeah.
because they paid somebody else to do it
Yes,
wrong.
yes.
And it took me a long time to navigate that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've had that, especially on the tech end. Well, I already paid some. Well, it's like, that's great. And
That's
I'm
it.
so sorry that you've experienced this. And I'm so sorry that this person was not trustworthy, not in integrity, ran off with your money or whatever the scenario was. Um, and also, I can't work for free, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a conversation that happens a lot, and, I've been in business as long as you've been in business. The next month, it'll be 18 years.
Ooh,
So, we've seen it all, right?
yeah.
And whenever there's something new that comes out, there's that band of snake oil salesmen
Yeah.
that show up loud as they could be, ready for the new crop of people coming into the online world and ready to sell them something they don't need for way too
Mhm,
much money and they're not prepared for.
mhm.
And it has always been part of my mission with my work to intercept when possible.
Yeah, and the thing is there's certainly people who they jump on the trends and they make money, snake oil or not, right? So they make money, but then they churn. It's really like a churn, um,
Yeah,
because it's then they're on to the next new thing.
yeah,
And
no, it's
I've
it's
always
nuts.
been a what you see is what you get person,
Yeah,
and also um, the fundamentals still hold true with business. You need to make money. You need to solve a problem. You need to provide value. You need to be profitable. You need to build relationships and trust. And so the fundamentals of all of this have not changed, no matter how many apps you want to throw at it, or how
mhm,
many platforms or AI or whatever the next thing is. And so I've always prided myself on being more of a relational, like, let's see what you really need and to make sense of
mhm,
what's going to work for you and what you need versus what is hype. The
yeah,
one big thing on my website is my no BS guarantee. And if I don't know enough about it, I'm not going
mhm,
to BS you about it. I'll help you find someone or refer you to someone who can, give you
mhm,
the real story on it. And then you get to decide, right? Because even when we work and people build out teams and I help them through that, it's like you can delegate responsibility, but you can't abdicate responsibility.
that is brilliance right there. I'm writing that down. You can, and you know, I was very involved with social media for a long time. I really kinda stepped away from it, but one of the red flags for me for years was when people would come to me and say, "Do my social," and I'd be like, "No,
Yeah.
you have to do your social. You have to understand where your voice is and where it should be and understand, where your people are what they're
Mhm.
talking about. And, as a small business owner, there's nobody can really do that for you because
Yeah.
what you're going to hear isn't going to be what I hear.
And also the idea, I don't like noise. Like I'm so hypersensitive to like noise and environment, and that's why I really get into the silence when I end up in nature and all. But this idea, which is also fueled by how social works and algorithms work, it's just that idea of like, let's get on a treadmill and let's keep turning up the dial of the treadmill
Mhm,
and churning out stuff. So like, let's churn out content. I don't want to churn out content. We don't need more. No one needs more
anything.
noise. Yeah. So how about something thoughtful
Better.
or
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
or well thought out or um, yeah, entertaining, funny. I mean, not just like, oh, it has to be deep,
Mhm.
right? So
But it just needs to be relevant
yeah.
and relatable and, talking to the right people. Like I do PR and I'll have clients reach out to me and tell me, I want to be on the Today Show. And I'm like, great. What have you done?
Yeah.
Nothing. That's not the first step.
Yeah, I know.
Can
Back in
you
the day,
cure
it was all
cancer?
like, "Let me get on Oprah." And the irony of this is I've studied with and been mentored by people who have been on Oprah, and
Mhm,
they will be the first to tell you. Now, of course, I'm dating myself, but if
mhm.
we're talking to the real 50 over 50, we all know who Oprah is,
Yeah,
and we've all seen the show. But like, what they're like, it did not change my
no.
life. I mean, it was a fantastic experience and
Mhm.
all this, but it's not like there's not a magic button that
No,
somebody
no.
pushes and then all of a sudden, woohoo. Sometimes things will take off and might be viral, and then 90% of the time, those people can't handle their systems and their
Well,
foundations are
it's
not
actually it's
set up
actually
to handle the sudden
it's
spike.
actually called the Oprah effect.
Right, right. I mean, the endless amount of those people from Oprah or The Secret, and then they like implode, right? Both personally and from a business
Yeah,
foundation.
it's like winning the lottery.
Right. And 90% of those people or more, whatever the stat is,
Mhm.
end up the same or worse off than they were before because they don't know how they relate. Their relationship and handling of
Yeah.
money was poor to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. And, I it's also it's so important to know who your audience is.
Mhm.
And most people will focus on who's my next client, and they're not looking at the ecosystem of people and companies and organizations that make up your audience.
Mhm.
And it's not just the next client. What about your last client? What about that client you worked with 3 years ago? What about the vendors you work with? I mean, these are all opportunities to meet people and connect with people in a curated way. And,
And
most
also
people.
how you relate to them is
Yeah.
how you relate to others. I always, when I was in corporate, I got to work with everyone from like the janitor to the CEO in some of my roles. And I could learn more about a person by how they treat the janitor, the cafeteria staff, the people that they don't have to suck up to, right?
Mhm.
Like, so I learned more about that. And so even as a business owner, how you treat all the people in your ecosystem is also a reflection and a part of an information for others to determine, okay, how about that person? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's very telling, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating.
And, yeah, I mean, it's so true. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah. And it's not like you have to do things perfect, right? I mean,
No, it's not. It's
one
just
of the things
being
with
kind.
even self leadership is sometimes you screw up and sometimes you show up poorly because of everyone's going through something and sometimes you're just not, but you can circle back, or it's sort of like the through line when you're reading a review, right, to determine, do I want to stay at this Airbnb or whatever else. It's like a through line, like what is the message, what is the consistent trend happening here with this um, product or person
Mhm.
or place.
Yeah, yeah, and, we have these very visible online lives and businesses, and, it's really important to be consistent
Mhm.
with how we show up. Like when AI came out,
Oh god,
I
yeah.
wasn't sure how I wanted to approach this because, I mean, it does help with a lot of things in my
Mhm.
business because a lot of the work that I do is research driven, so it's really been very helpful. But I didn't wanna be that person that I did something else 2 weeks ago and now I'm an AI expert.
Right. Well, and also too, like, I think AI is going to be the biggest story, the biggest example of garbage in, garbage out, because it was trained on things. And then if it's trained on the wrong things and it continues to train on bad information, you get even worse information, I guess, if you will. So it's going to it'll develop over time, obviously, but I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
it'll cannibalize itself to a certain degree because it too is not the magic answer, but it
It's
can be
true.
used, right? I mean, a tool. I've always said um, when I worked for a CIO in like 1998, when I went to build, mind you, their first intranet, that was
Mhm.
before it exists today. But he's like, technology, we need to do this, but technology is here to enable the business. So
Mhm.
I always say if it's not enabling your business, if it's not making your life better, like bona fide better, um, then you don't really need it.
True, very true.
And I think the same will hold true for AI.
Yeah, yeah. The way that I use it and I teach others to use it is to think out what you want before you ask for anything.
Yeah.
Like, and really and it's really helping to, show people the value of planning and strategy
Mhm.
and driving the what you want from the tool, not letting the tool drive your decisions.
And then also discernment, I think,
Yes.
is something that is not it's not used as often as it could be. Also with the results of anything from AI. So now you've got something. So it's almost like you asked your smart friend a question, right?
Mhm,
And then because they've done so many different things you haven't done, they come back with some
mhm.
information. Then you get to use discernment and not treat it as gospel and determine like, well, what were your sources? Where did you get this from? Did you get this from, the time that you worked at this prestigious place, or was this from you know, your grandfather working in the field? And it doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong, but where is it coming from?
Yeah,
Because context matters
yeah,
and nuance matters.
yes.
And I think that's what you, at least for me, like part of why I like working a lot with people one on one and such too is because context matters and nuance matters. And you can bring that to a small group, um, but anything that's like mass produced or just chugged out, it lacks that.
Yeah, and there's a lot that scares me about that with AI, like people creating all of these custom chat GPTs. They're not software developers.
And the best, I was at a PT appointment the one day, and this young person was there for an injury. They're in high school, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just asked ChatGPT to do my home homework, the coding homework." They're like doing computer things, and I'm thinking, well, how much crap are we going to build that actually breaks and is so easily hacked because we just asked a computer to spit something out? Like the whole point is thinking it through. Now, that said, I mean, I use it myself to find
Mhm,
answers to some technical questions, but I'm coming with a base of knowledge, and then I'm going to check it, like fact check it for its thing. So it'll be interesting times nonetheless. I figure there'll come a point when everything will want to be so smart. I'd rather just have a dumb house, thank you, because I like being able to be in control of my flushing and the heat. These things matter to me. And when we go in the back country or even in these lodges, I mean, these lodges were in the middle of nowhere, not even accessible by car. Like, yeah, no one's smart in anything. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell phone service, there's none of that. So then you get really reduced to and tuned into yourself.
mhm,
And this happened to be like with a group and a guide. So it's like then you get tuned into the group, the people, the group dynamics, and you have conversations and interactions and experiences that you would never have if you had cell phone access, Wi-Fi access, and all that, because everybody'd be busy doing something else.
Yeah, I have a 22-year-old son, and when him and his friends started driving, I realized this missing component to my parenting.
Uh-oh.
None of them had any relation to where things were because they've never looked at a map.
Now, no one can read maps. Yeah.
They never even saw one. Never mind
Yeah.
learn how to read it. They didn't know what it was. They were going by by GPS, and they had like every time my son would drive, we'd be going 30 minutes in the other direction to get home, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he was, "I'm following this." I said, "You shouldn't follow it all the time."
Yeah, yeah. And that's a great analogy, you know, for like business ownership too, or life in general. Like, what, you know, who are you having tell you where to go? Like the old Robin Williams joke with the GPS, turn right here. He's like, I'm halfway across the bridge. I'm not that depressed.
Well, there's an area near where I lived where there's a railroad crossing, and it's right like adjacent, like parallel almost to the entrance onto a highway. And
Oh.
people, when like GPS really started
People
being,
merge onto the tracks.
yeah, and
Oh.
they get stuck on the tracks. And
Oh.
after like the third time this happened, the railroad company started charging people to remove their cars.
Sure, sure. And you'll get removed with the next passing train.
Yeah, I mean, just
Unfortunately.
wait 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot recently.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think, but you know, on the flip side, I've run into a lot of folks who maybe they're brought up with technology, or like myself, they're very tech knowledgeable, and but applying that human touch, that translation, that context, that, you know, how do we want to use it
Yeah.
instead of letting it use me? Like my favorite feature on my phone is do not disturb.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. You have to drive the tools, don't let them
Yeah,
drive you. That's what
for
I
sure.
say all the time, and knowing which tool to use when, knowing when it just needs to be you. And that is all right back to your comment about discernment. We get
Mhm.
to decide, and, I think that that's the human component that we can't let be taken away from us.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about self-leadership and how do you work, with clients and bring that into the equation?
Yeah, yeah. So I've always been, you know, focused on the person aspect, even when I'm working with business or anything else, because there's a human involved here, right?
Mhm.
And I've often thought about that in terms of studying, you know, studying all the books over time, and then dove a whole lot deeper in it when I became Dare to Lead trained through Brene Brown's methodology, and everything starts with self
Yeah,
leadership, which makes total sense.
right.
That and a whole pile of therapy will get you to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually part of the ecosystem involved here.
Mhm.
So when I'm working with a, a business owner, like even most recently, uh, the person was like feeling a black or white sort of choice over whether to go to an important industry conference. And I'm like, okay, well, let's reflect, like, let's walk through, like, how do you feel going through all the steps that it takes to get there and being there, whatever else? How do you feel if you don't go? What might be a third option? So giving yourself permission and the tools, and you can't do it alone, right? People are like, okay, I'm just going to go do all this alone. But you don't think of it. You don't pull the tools out of your toolbox when you need it. You need that in relationship to others to be able to see what you can't see. But then with the self leadership piece being like, okay, it's your business. You get to choose what you want and how you want it to be, because there is no magic key, there is no right way, there is no if you do this then that. I mean, there's no guarantees. So I think that that's a real important piece that gets missed especially when you're a newer business owner, I can think back to myself. It's like I'm listening to everyone else, like, well, everyone knows more than me. So it's like you look up like a sweet little Disney character. Oh,
Mm,
oh, you're gonna tell me the answer. But over time, you're like, okay, wait a minute, a lot of those did not work for me, or I was sold a
yeah.
false promise, or oh, look, I invested tens of thousands of dollars in this thing that was not for me. Um, so it's always at the core of that, and it changes every day because we're not the same person we were this morning, yesterday, 10 years ago.
And everything else changes around us. It's a
Exactly, exactly.
constant perpetual, um, dance of the spinning plates.
Yeah, and for any scientist or technical person, you're like, wait a minute, too many variables are changing at once. That's not good. And
It's
but
not
yet
going
that's what
away.
we're dealing with, right? That's what we're actually dealing with every single day.
Yeah, well, that's not gonna change. When I, used to do a lot of social media, I had a program where I had 14 modules with every social media platform, and all I was doing was updating
That
content. I
sounds
had a whole
tiring. Yeah, I was
team.
gonna say.
Oh my god, and then I redid it, and I just pulled out all the social media, and it was like, "Oh, this is so much more fun."
Well, right. I mean, because if you need to keep it up to date, and you can go to bed one day and you wake up the next morning and they've changed the entire user interface, and you're like, well,
Yeah,
what
or
are you
it's
doing?
the whole thing is gone.
I gotta
So, yeah,
recreate it. Yeah,
yeah,
I know.
I redefined my business at that point. I said, "Let's focus on content," and Social Media Examiner has a great program for $200 a year.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sign
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, I know, and then when they get rid of features you actually use, it drives you nuts. Like, I swear yesterday when I was cooking dinner that the New York Times said that it got rid of the private, comments notes feature where I would put, like, my own notes to myself, and
Mhm.
I'm like, "Is that true? I have to go look at that because that's where my notes are. I don't have a pen and a paper on my recipe."
Yeah, it's a never-ending, changing world
Right.
every single day, and, like you mentioned before, focusing on the things that don't change, the relationships, and the building of trust, and,
Mhm.
all of those things, compassion and kindness,
Yeah.
and, connecting with people and on a human level, and discernment. I mean, all of these things are where we need to lead from.
Yeah. And also, like, to be honest with yourself, like, to live your day and operate your business from a place of actual capacity and not a
Mm,
fantasy capacity of all the things you dreamed up that could possibly done
yeah.
if you were at 110% on 7 cups of coffee and you were at your best and nothing else was going wrong and you had slept perfectly and you ate perfectly. Like, that's not reality, right?
Well, then we wouldn't be having this real 50 over 50 community because we'd all be dead.
Exactly, exactly.
The caffeine intake alone from your little scenario is
Yeah,
enough
yeah, yeah.
to
Yeah,
do you in, never mind the work and the stress and the lack of sleep.
right, right. So you need to operate from actual
Yeah,
capacity, and that's not meant to limit possibility. It's
no.
meant to focus your
Yeah,
time, attention, and energy to where it matters most.
mhm, and this is exactly why one size doesn't fit all, because, businesses are not cookie cutter, and if you're a solo business person or you have a very small team of, fractional people, there's only so much you could do.
Mhm,
And,
mhm.
a lot of people are comparing themselves to these bigger entrepreneurial ventures that started many, many years ago in the birth of the internet, and, the opportunity to build something like that isn't realistic for most people at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
And do you really wanna do that? Because
Right.
they don't show what it takes
Mm-mm.
to
Mm,
create that kind of success,
yeah.
and what you need to have in place to do that, and most people just can't. I don't
Well,
want to.
and
I
also,
I don't
do
want
you want to? Like, I
yeah,
watched so many people in programs that I had invested in, which, some good, some not so good. But that idea of, like, scaling, okay, but you always have to look at your profit margin. So you might scale, you might take your $50,000 business or $100,000 business and scale it to $1,000,000, but it cost you $950,000 to
exactly.
make that beast run.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make it right or wrong or indifferent, but what do you want from your, I always say the life plan comes before the business plan. Like
Mhm.
what do you want ultimately?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And how does it fit with your life?
Mhm.
I've become kind of a mentor to one of my friends who's 35 years old, and she has 2 little girls, and, she's working with a lot of people that don't have children,
Mm,
and she's trying to keep up with, the pace that they're at with their single lifestyles, and I'm like the word of caution from the background going, "You can't do that anymore."
right.
Like, you need to step away and craft the life and the business that works for the stage of life that you're in right now, and no
Mhm.
matter what you're doing, the role of parent is gonna come first.
Yeah.
So you're always gonna be in a stressed out situation trying to make everybody happy,
Yeah, and you
and,
need to leave buffers. I mean, I've worked with people, a lot of like young, not young mothers, but newer mother, right, younger children. And you need to have buffer in your schedule and your plan
yeah,
because you can't follow this atypical. We're going to time block every little thing and it's all going to, because it's not going to work because your kid's going
it's
to
not gonna
get
work.
a sore throat
Yeah.
or COVID or an allergy reaction or the
Yeah,
school's
it's
going
and
to close or
it's immediate. It's when the
that's
kid
so.
stuff comes up, it's immediate. It's like, "Drop everything, go now." And, yeah, I mean, I remember when my son was little, that's why I started a business. I was a single parent and working in a law firm, I would never see him. So I was not gonna create a business that had me not available to him.
Yeah, that did this create the same thing that
Yeah.
you
So I created a business where, I was there with my laptop at every game and I'm waiting 3 hours at karate, I was there with my laptop,
mhm,
and I would work from wherever I was, but I was able to bring him all over the
mhm.
place, but, of course, when anything happens, you know, it's child first, parent first, and, but it's been really rewarding to be able to share that experience with her.
Yeah, yeah,
And I could see it's really helping, so it feels good. It feels
yeah,
good
that's
to
satisfying.
to be
Yeah.
able to share, the things that you've went through, and that's what these stories are about too, so
Mhm.
I appreciate you sharing
Yeah, I
all
appreciate you
yours.
and your series and the people I've listened to because it's like this wonderful, in terms of the one size does not fit all. It's like this beautiful mosaic and tapestry of people with their different personalities and styles and experiences and things that they do, and it's all part of the beauty of the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, I try not to keep too much structure around it. I'm just letting it's an experiment.
Mhm.
But we actually went over our 30 minutes, and, I want everybody to connect with Paula. Here is her website, and she also has a Substack. You can find her personal essays here on Substack, and I like to wrap these up with a wisdom bomb, a
Okay.
little nugget of something that you wanna leave people with.
Hmm. Um, I guess what I'll choose is one. It's the one that popped in my mind, so I'm going to trust it and go with it. Is one of the famous quotes. I guess it was Eleanor Roosevelt, I think. But my mother had often shared this with me too, and yet embodying it can be so hard. But no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. So
Mhm.
with that self leadership and with that anything that you're choosing to do, um, trust in yourself and not so much external looking and comparing and what have you, but going with that clarity and that deep knowing because that's the compass.
Yeah, it so is, and it really puts a nice end cap to this conversation that we had because we touched on a lot of things that fall into that, so thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be back next week with another Real 50 Over 50 interview, and, we've got 5 interviews in October, plus a wisdom panel that's gonna be pretty damn cool, so stay tuned for more details on that. Thank you, Paul, I appreciate you
Thank
coming and
you.
sharing today and talking to everyone, and if you're listening on the replay, tag us, ask questions and comments, and we will come back and keep the conversation going.
Sure thing.
Thanks.